Today, we're jumping into a fiery political debate that kicked off way back in 1790. But trust me, its shockwaves are still shaping how we think about government, change, and, well, everything. It all started with a little thing called a revolution.
So to really get this, you have to transport yourself back to 1789. The French Revolution is in full swing, and for so many idealists across Europe, this was it. This was a moment of pure, unfiltered triumph. You had thinkers like Dr. Richard Price who saw this as the ultimate win for the rights of man. It was a new dawn, humanity finally breaking free. The excitement was absolutely electric.
Okay, but imagine standing against that massive wave of optimism. There was one thinker, an Irish statesman named Edmund Burke, who looked at what was happening in France and saw something totally different. He didn't see liberty. No, he saw a terrifying recipe for anarchy, for terror, and in the end, for a military dictatorship. And in 1790, he put this completely shocking prediction down on paper for the entire world to read.
You see, the late 18th century was just buzzing with these new Enlightenment ideas. The big buzzwords were reason, logic, and these abstract concepts of human rights. Philosophers were seriously arguing that you could and should build a perfect society totally from scratch, just by using pure rational principles.
And this right here, this captures the revolutionary spirit perfectly. The whole idea was that old institutions, the monarchy, the church, the aristocracy, they were just irrational, broken parts of an old machine. So, what's the solution? Simple. Demolish the whole thing and rebuild it using a flawless logical blueprint, like the rights of man.
And this is exactly where Burke comes crashing in. His book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, wasn't just some casual critique. Oh no, it was a philosophical bombshell. It took that entire tear it down and start over worldview and challenged it to its very core.
Now, the timing here is absolutely crucial. You have to get this. Burke wrote his book in 1790. The really bloody part, the Reign of Terror, that didn't even start until 1793. So he wasn't reacting to the violence that came later, he was predicting it. He was arguing that the revolution's starting principles made that violence basically inevitable. It was an incredibly prescient thing to say at the time.
So what was Burke's argument really all about? Well, when you boil it down, it was a massive clash between two completely different ways of seeing the world.
And the divide was stark. You had the revolutionaries championing these abstract, universal rights of man that should apply to everyone, everywhere. Burke, on the other hand, he pointed to the concrete, specific liberties that Englishmen had, rights passed down through actual history. The revolutionaries wanted to tear everything down and rebuild based on pure reason. Burke argued for preserving what you have and reforming it gradually. For them, society was just a contract between people alive right now. But for Burke, it was a sacred partnership between the living, the dead, and everyone who is yet to be born.
And this brings us to one of Burke's most misunderstood ideas. When he talks about prejudice, he is not talking about bigotry, not at all. For him, prejudice was like society's giant savings account of wisdom. It's this collection of instincts and traditions that have been tested over centuries. It's the stuff that guides us automatically, so we don't have to sit down and reason out every single little action from scratch.
This quote really gets to the soul of his argument, doesn't it? His point is that the generation that's alive right now doesn't own society. They're just temporary caretakers. They've inherited this incredible thing from their ancestors, and they have a deep, profound duty to pass it on, hopefully a little better, but definitely not destroyed, to their kids and grandkids. Tearing it all down is to him the ultimate act of arrogance.
So if the revolutionaries saw the state as a machine, Burke saw it as a living thing, something like a massive ancient tree. You don't prove you're a good gardener by yanking the tree out by its roots, right? No, you prove it by carefully pruning, by nurturing its growth, and by respecting its complexity, understanding that it grew that way for a reason.
All of this led Burke to a pretty dark conclusion. He basically argued that this revolutionary quest for a theoretically perfect society was totally doomed from the start. And why? Because real life is infinitely more complicated than any theory on paper. Trying to force a simple blueprint onto a complex world wouldn't lead to utopia, it would lead straight to terror.
And he laid out the steps with just chilling accuracy. First, he said, you destroy the traditional sources of authority. Then, you attack private property, and that destroys social trust. And into that giant vacuum of power and trust rushes anarchy and terror. And eventually, after all that, a terrified and exhausted people will welcome any strong man on a horse who promises to bring back order. He was basically predicting the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte more than a decade before it even happened. It's uncanny.
So, why are we still talking about a book from 1790? Why does it matter so much today? Well, it's because Burke didn't just criticize a revolution. He laid out an entire political philosophy that has been echoing through the centuries ever since.
This book is, for all practical purposes, the founding document of modern conservatism. It laid out a coherent, really powerful argument for why tradition matters, for the wisdom hidden inside our institutions, and for the importance of gradual, careful change over radical upheaval.
And these are the core ideas that have had such a lasting punch. The idea that society is an inheritance we need to cherish. That abstract ideals can actually be really dangerous when you apply them without wisdom. And maybe the most important takeaway of all, that real, lasting liberty isn't found by tearing everything down, but in a society that carefully balances freedom with order and progress with tradition.
Which, of course, leaves us with the huge question that Burke forces us all to grapple with, a question that's just as relevant today as it was in 1790. How do we find that balance between the wisdom of the past and the needs of the present? And when does that vital respect for tradition risk becoming an obstacle to the changes we really need?
This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.